Welcome to On My Way to Wealth, the podcast where busy Gen Xers can learn financial tips as they navigate life on their way to wealth. And now, please join your host, Luis Rosa.
This episode is brought to you by Latin Excellence. Visit latinexcellence.com. That's Latinx, CELLENCE.com or latinxmovement.com to learn more and shop our merchandise. You are excellence. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of On My Way to Wealth. My name is Luis, and I'm your host. I'd like to talk to you about the I word, inflation, which has been a lot in the news lately. I'm sure you've heard it left and right. So I want to talk to you about what it is, why it happens, and also how it affects you, and what are some of the things that you can do to fight inflation, because there are certain things that you can do in your own personal lives because it impacts many aspects of our finances. So let's go over the definition of inflation. According to the good folks at Oxford Dictionary, the simple definition is a general increase in prices and fall in the purchasing value of money. So there's two aspects to that definition. I'm going to go into both of them. So the simple definition is basically this: prices are going up over time, right? That's the simplest way of looking at it. It's I have some examples for you, just to put it into context. A gallon of gas back in 1989, the average nationwide was $1 for 1 gallon. 1990, I remember, I wasn't driving at the time, but I remember seeing those gas prices around $1.10 or so in 1990 at the gas station. So picture that and compare that to what a gallon of gas is today. According to AAA, the national average in the United States for a gallon of gas is $4.32. So from 1989, 1990 to 2022, prices of gas have quadrupled, right? So that's one aspect of inflation, where the prices over time, you don't necessarily feel it year over year because it's kind of like a silent, slow killer. You know, it's one of those things that you just don't necessarily feel on the day to day, but slowly it starts going up. Like, for example, if you're a renter, you might notice that every time you renew your lease, the landlord might add another $25 to the rent. You know, probably not the end of the world if you're looking at it, if you say you're doing a year lease or 2-year lease, right? But all these things happen simultaneously where the gas is going up, your rent's going up, the groceries are going up, the cost of probably every good or service that you're using continues to rise. Now, unfortunately, wages don't necessarily rise in accordance with this, which is a big problem, because then when you look at it, most people are experiencing the squeeze on the consumer side, but then they're not necessarily being compensated on the wage side, and that creates a problem because now you have the same amount of money that you need to purchase the same amount of goods that now cost more, which means you have to either save less or perhaps consume less as a result, right? So a lot of people, especially those on fixed incomes, really get hit hard when inflation is here. Now, why does inflation occur? So there are various reasons, but in general, what happens is the cost of production goes up. Things like raw materials, sometimes wages too, depending on the industry. But, it creates a ripple effect because you're looking at a lot of things that cost a lot of money. It could be shipping costs, for example. So as gas prices go up, right, a lot of things that use a lot of oil will then have to compensate and raise prices on you. So, for example, airline tickets, or if we're importing goods from other nations, right, it costs a lot more to bring in those same goods from China, for example. So those prices of production go up, and then in turn, they get passed on to the consumer. And that's what happens over time. Then things start going up and up and up, and you don't feel it. Now, why is this important? The reason for that is because I want to talk to you about some of the ways that for you to be aware of how you can basically fight this, right? Even as a consumer, right? So here's the problem. Not a lot you can do as a consumer. Prices are going to go up and you either consume the goods and services or you choose not to, or choose a cheaper alternative or a combination of the two, right? There's not much you can do as a consumer. Now, what would you need to be in order to be in a position to actually benefit or outpace inflation? Now, here's what happens. A lot of people think that when they put money in the bank, that it's safe, right? And it has a relative measure of safety when you consider the fact that, say, you're putting in the bank under the limits of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, and you're guaranteed that your money's there in terms of your principal. It's quote unquote safe because your money actually does not go down and you do not lose any value in your money, right? So a lot of people are not comfortable investing because the value of what they're putting into it may go down, right? So some people are not comfortable with that. Now, here's the problem with that. If you look at what inflation does compared to the rate of return that you receive when you have money in the bank, you are in fact losing money over time. Now, there's different buckets that you should have based on your different goals. So for example, your emergency money, it's completely fine to have it in a savings account or high yield savings account that you can easily access, because one of the things that a savings account provides is that liquidity, right? You can walk into your bank and take your money out. You don't have to worry about selling an asset or anything like that. It also provides that safety, right? Because you know that the money is there and it's not going to fluctuate in value based on the economy or anything. So the money in the bank is relatively safe. So that is the draw, right? But not all of your money should necessarily be in the bank. This is one of the things I want you to consider, especially when you look at goals that are way out into the future. For example, retirement. You know, if you're still at an age where you have several years out from retirement, maybe decades as well, you probably should be investing your money, right? And it's one of the things that you definitely want to talk to an investment advisor or a financial planner, because you have to develop a portfolio and a strategy that's appropriate for you. But ultimately, I want to sell you on the general concept. The money in the bank is going to continue to lose money over time because prices continue to go up and the rate of interest that you're getting on your bank account doesn't match. So the same example of $1 average gallon of gas in 1989 compared to $4.32, I wanted to show you what an average, or the median home price, according to the St. Louis Fed, in the same year, 1989, was $124,800. That's what the median cost of a home in the United States. Now imagine that, $124,800. Compare that to today, $428,700. This is as of May 2022. So again, we kind of seen almost like that quadrupling, right, over that time frame. And I chose a time frame just to show you like several decades, and also because it's easy to see how it goes from like 1 to a multiple of 4, right? Now, let's look at the average U.S. savings account yield right now. According to bankrate.com, the average U.S. savings account is yielding 0.06%. And you heard that right, with another zero in front, 0.06%. Now, an average CD for 1 year is yielding 0.23%. Right? So we're talking like way less than half of 1%, right? Now, what is inflation? As of March 2022, inflation just clocked at 8.54%. Now, you can see the discrepancy there, right? You have money in the bank earning you 0.6% or 0.23 if you put it in a CD, or maybe you put it in a high yield savings account and you're probably getting 0.5%, for example, right? Which is considered a lot higher than the national average for a savings account. But on the other hand, inflation is 8.54%. Now you can see the vast gap in that, right? So for money, obviously, that you have, that you need immediate access to, like your emergency savings or money that you needed for a short-term goal, like a down payment for a home, something like that, obviously you do not want to invest that. It's okay to just continue to have that in some form of savings, high yield savings. But if you're talking about money that is very long-term, like retirement money, then you want to consider investing, because using this math, you're just going to be losing money every single year. Now, you won't notice it because your actual dollar amount's still in the bank, But what's going to happen is that dollar a gallon of gas is going to eventually be $4.32, right? That $124,800 home is going to eventually be $428. The money in the bank is going to just lose purchasing power, which is the second part of that definition, right? A general increase in prices and a fall in the purchasing value of money. So to give you an example, if we average 3% inflation over the next 10 years, say you have $50,000 in the bank, well, that actually will only be able to buy you $37,000 worth of goods, even though you technically will still see the 50K in the bank, right? Plus a little bit more because of the interest you're earning. But ultimately, it really only buys $37,000 worth because inflation is just eating away at it. Now, to add insult to injury, that 0.06% of interest that you're getting in the bank, which is very small, you're actually paying income taxes on that money every year, especially if you make over $10. Usually your bank will issue you a 1099 INT, and you have to pay income tax on the amount of interest you get. So now you have inflation plus taxation eating away at the purchasing power of your money. And the same thing goes for salaries, right? Now, here's one of the ways that you can fight this. As a consumer, you can't do much. As a saver, can't really do much either, right? Because you're just stuck with whatever the bank gives you. So there's two things you can do. One of them is if you're a W-2 employee, very important that over time, you make sure that you continue to show enough value where you are in a position to ask your employer for a raise and or a bonus over time. This is something that Rick Gillis talked about in two of our episodes. The most recent one was episode 88. He's the author of Leveling the Playing Field. It's episode 88. If I have not listened to it and you're a W-2 employee, I highly recommend that you do so because he actually shows you how you can position yourself to basically go to your employer at some point and demonstrate the value that you bring to the company. And the major reason to do this, especially now, is because inflation. If you keep having the same salary or just like a very small percent bump in your salary from time to time, it's not going to cut it because now you're making the same or just slightly above what you usually make. But ultimately, inflation is going to be outpacing, so you'll be chasing all these goods and services that you need to purchase with the same amount of money. So in essence, you're losing money. The same concept as the money just being saved in the bank. So listen to episode 88 with Rick Gillis, Leveling the Playing Field. Highly recommended. He gives you great tips on how you become a person that puts yourself in a position to demonstrate your value to your employer. Now, so what else can you become? You have to switch your mind frame, your mindset from getting out of the saver mentality and becoming an investor. And there are plenty of places where you can invest. Obviously, again, you want to make sure that if you're not already, you should consult with a financial advisor that can guide you. Two important reasons. One is because when you're working with somebody else, the advisor can help you determine what is most suitable for you, depending on what your plans are, your goals, and your current resources. And number two, also work with you to leave emotion out of your decisions, because a lot of people in this scenario, the stock market going down, for example, prices going up, I've seen people panic, and they call like, hey, should we kind of just like go to cash or something? And I completely understand that because it's a valid point, right? You see prices going up, you see stock market going down, and you're wondering, hey, what should I do with the money? Especially if you're a retiree, you don't want to be in a situation where you lose more and more money over time because most likely you're living in some form of fixed income and you want to use that money to live on. You want to make sure it doesn't run out. Now, here's the thing. Over the long term, it's probably the wrong move for you to make is to panic now and start selling when the market is low and just going into cash or something that's quote unquote safer, right? So the financial planner can help you develop a plan that takes into account, factors in high inflationary periods as well, so that your plan works even under these types of periods, right? Now, nobody wants to open up their investment statement and see that it's down. Now, here's the thing. If you do a history search on the S&P 500, the Standard & Poor's 500, it has averaged 10% in its history. And obviously it goes up and down all the time, right? Especially as you see it now, it's been very volatile. And it's not easy for a lot of people to stomach, but on average, if you stay the course, the S&P 500 has averaged 10%. Now, why is that important? Because if inflation is averaging, say, 3%, for example, and you're investing at an average of 10%, and not everybody will get that, obviously, because this is the S&P 500. So normally you wouldn't invest all of your money into just the S&P 500. You will have various different investments if you have a diversified portfolio, which is very recommended. But this is just to illustrate the point to you. Even if you're averaging 7-8% over time, right? Because you have a diversified portfolio with bonds, stocks, real estate, gold, silver, things like that. You will be in a position to outpace inflation and outpace taxation. So the goal is so that the rate of return you're receiving, even after taxes, is still more than the rate of return that you would have received in the bank, number one. And also, more importantly, it's more than the average rate of inflation. Now, inflation just clocked in at 8.54%. It has not been that. It has not been averaging that. This is just what it's doing currently. So obviously, not a lot of investments are going to necessarily give you that kind of rate of return right now. But we have to look at things historically, and you also have to look at projections and just look at things over time, because you might see some patterns over time, right? So it's not like it's going to stay at 8-point-something% forever. It might average 3% over time. We might average 2-point-something%. And so these are the kinds of things that you want to look at. Now, if you're not comfortable investing, for example, there are other places where you can look at. But just to give you an idea, people that invest in real estate have usually done well during inflationary periods, because real estate, as you saw with those home prices, is one of those things that tends to rise with inflation, right? So there's plenty of places. It doesn't necessarily need to be the stock market, but I want you to look at your mindset and say, I want to become an investor, not only a saver. Saving is amazing, is great. And if you're already there, or you're at a point where you're saving, that's perfect. But think of yourself eventually as somebody that wants to become an investor, because over the long term, you want to make sure that you keep up or outpace inflation and taxation, right? Some people invest in other things, like gold, for example. But here's the thing, you never want to have all your eggs in one basket. And obviously, you don't want to be in a situation where you're timing the market, which is why it's so important to have a diversified portfolio. So you want to have your money working for you in different sectors of the economy all the time. Another one is I did an episode 96 on Series I bonds. These are government bonds. I'm not going to give you too much detail here. Just check out episode 96. But just letting you know, right now, as of May 2022, these I bonds are actually, they yield a higher rate as inflation goes up. So it's 9.62% right now that these bonds are yielding. So if you put your money into that, and there are some caveats that you need to look out for, but just listen to that episode so that you get all the information as far as like who it's good for and what are some of the limitations. But 9.62%, right? It's keeping up with the pace of inflation. If you have $10,000 that you were planning on just having in the bank that you don't think you need immediately, it might be a good option to do that, as opposed to getting 0.6% in the bank, right? Or 0.23 in a sleeve. Maybe an I bond could be a good strategy for you, right? So something to consider. So basically reframe your thought process to look at things the same way a bank would. Where are the opportunities? Can I borrow money here at this percent? Because think about it. When you deposit money in the bank as a saver, right? You go in there and you put $10,000 in the bank. They're going to turn around and give you 0.6%. If I go in right behind you and I ask that very same bank for a car loan or a credit card, they're going to hit me with a high interest rate, right? Now, what are they doing? They're lending me your money for a much higher interest rate than they're paying you, and making that difference in the process, right? So you want to switch your mentality to that. That's called arbitrage, right? So you want to start thinking about, well, how can I get money at a cheap rate on one end and invest it higher on the other end, right? So these are some of the strategies you can use, negotiating a higher salary, investing in things that outpace inflation, like Series I bonds, the stock market. And also, if you have no other strategy, then you might have to resort, or a combination of, maybe just looking at your budget now and see what are some of the things that you can cut back on. There are some subscriptions out there. That's always a major one. And believe me, even I fall prey to this. where like I will sign up for something and just at some point completely forget about it. Even small things, like I might sign up for one of those streaming services, but I only did it because I like that one particular show and I don't really watch the rest of the shows on there. Once that show is over, then, it might be very easy to just forget and continue to pay that monthly subscription, So what I started doing now is small little changes, like binging a particular show. I'm like, okay, this thing is out. It's coming out in April, so I'm not going to watch it until May or whatever, whenever I have time. But I sign up for the service. I watch all the episodes, and then I cancel it a month later, right? And it may sound silly, but it does save you money because those are the little things over time that could then give you more money back into your budget to then turn around and say, you know what? I want to become an investor. I'm going to open up a brokerage account and start investing money. Because over time, if you do this kind of things, right, cut back on things, negotiate a higher salary, and also then start investing, not just saving, you're able to then create a scenario for yourself where you're putting yourself in a much better situation to deal with this inflation because it's real, it's here, and we might have to buckle up for a little bit. It might be here for a while, right? But if you're just a consumer, then you're stuck. There are no choices other than either consuming what it is that you need or not, or less of it or lesser quality in order to compensate for the fact that your money only goes a certain way, right? So I hope that you have found this useful. Thank you for tuning in as always. Feel free to send me an email, luis@onmywaytowealth.com, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for listening to On My Way to Wealth. If you have any questions, please send me an email at luis@onmywaytowealth.com. The information provided here is for information and education purposes only. The opinions expressed herein are solely those of myself, unless otherwise specifically cited. Material presented is believed to be from reliable sources, and no representations are made by my firm or myself about other parties' information or accuracy or completeness. All information or ideas provided should be discussed in detail with a financial advisor, accountant, or legal counsel prior to implementation. Thank you.